We then move on as we come into the early 2000s to zigzag federalism. So now we see power sort of becoming more flexible. This was under Clinton's time. So sort of power moves is flexible amongst some states, but is stricter in others. So we see a variation. Some states need more federal control, and some states can be left because they're doing quite a good job. Now, we come on to Bush and Obama. So, President Bush was a Republican president. And as a Republican president, we would expect him to want to have a smaller federal government and to give more power back to the states. But he surprised everybody and didn't do that. He almost acted a little bit more like a Democrat. And we see this through several policies. So if we have a look at No Child Left Behind, this was an education policy where Bush said, right, every single state has to do these standardised tests. It's no longer for the states to decide on their own educational system. They have to do these. And failing schools were made to join up with more successful schools. So this was federal government dictating to the states what they should be doing with their own education systems. We saw an expansion of Medicare. So Medicare, a reminder again, is where we give more aid to the elderly, because often they're the ones that need more medical assistance, especially with prescriptions and things. And over the course of 10 years, he spent $400 million. This really made lots of his own party very cross. Homeland security, so following 9/11, we had the terrorists hitting the Twin Towers, we saw Homeland security explode. It was massive. So spending on defence went up by 125%. Homeland security spending went up by five times. So again, federal government getting bigger and bigger. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they were two big mortgage companies, and between the two of them, they owned $12 trillion worth of the mortgage market. So people who've borrowed money from those banks to get a house. And in 2007, 2008, there was a massive crash, and this was our banking crisis. Now, as a Republican, you would expect Bush to just go sort it out yourselves, your private companies. It's not for government to get involved. But again, to the surprise of lots of critics, Bush said, yeah, we're going to go with a $700 billion bailout, and they bailed out those banks. Overall, George Bush's spending and federal government spending increased by 33%. So federal government spending up 33%. So we see federal government getting bigger and bigger. There are no arrows on my handout to show you that states are taking back any control. So we see under George Bush that federal government has definitely expanded. Now, when we come on to Obama, the first thing I've told you at the top is that he focused on domestic policy. Now, it's usually left to the states to deal with their own domestic policy. And by domestic policy, I mean health, education, those sorts of things. Presidents usually focus on foreign affairs. But Obama made it his mission to change domestic policy, and this was his change agenda. So in 2012, we see the number of state and local government employees to federal government employees go down. So federal government's getting bigger and bigger. We've got many more federal employees compared to state employees. Federal government assistance to states went up from 3.7% of the American GDP to 4.6% in his first year. So federal government again is expanding, and they must have needed to collect in more taxes to do that. And we saw Obama oversee a $20 billion stimulus package that went to the states. Under Obama, it was $246 billion, and previously it had been $20 billion. We saw the reauthorization of the S-chip program in 2009, and this is a healthcare program for poor families. So again, those who might not be able to afford really good healthcare insurance. And then we come on to his Obamacare, so the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, which is where Obama wanted to make it easier for people to get access to private health insurance. And we will do a later lesson on this because this is a really big topic. And this is where critics have said this was the end of federalism. This is where Obama basically took all the control and told the states exactly what to do. So people have often said this was the end of federalism. So the Tea Party, if we look further down the handout, the Tea Party accused Obama of being a socialist, not a federalist, because Obama said that the states had to participate in Medicare expansion or lose all funding. The Tea Party is a faction, so sort of group within the Republican Party, and they're very right wing, and they are very anti-government spending. They did not like the fact that Obama had said to the states, if you don't spend more on Medicare, if you don't give the elderly more and more money, I'm not going to give you any more funding. It's not going to come from federal government. So he was kind of holding them to ransom. The states didn't like that either. They didn't like being told by Obama, you know, you're going to hold us to ransom. You're not going to give us funding if we don't do what you say. So they brought a case to the Supreme Court. And this case is National Federation of Independent Business versus Sebelius. And often in essays, we can just write the Sebelius case. And this is where the court said, no, Obama, you can't do that. You can't tell the states, do this specifically, or I'm going to take away all funding from you. And there we see one little arrow going back to the states. The states were taking back some kind of control. And at the end of the handout, I've just put down two more cases that we will look at when we do Supreme Court. Shelby County versus Holder and Ada versus Smith. So Shelby County versus Holder is a voting rights case. And basically, states have been told in the 1960s, you can't discriminate against people. When you're holding your elections, you have to make sure that everyone can equally vote. And to do that, before you run your election, you have to tell federal government how you're going to do it. In Shelby versus Holder in 2013, the state said, this isn't fair, this is outdated, you can't tell us what to do anymore. And the Supreme Court found in their favour. So this is states taking back a little bit more control. And in Ada versus Smith, some states, not all, some states refused to recognise same-sex couples adopting. So anyone who'd been adopted by a same-sex couple, it wasn't recognised as a proper relationship, as a parental relationship. And the Supreme Court agreed. And that's, again, the states taking back power. Now, we'll come back to Ada versus Smith, because in the case of Obergefell versus Hodges, where they said that same-sex partnerships have to be recognised in every single state, we saw that overturned. But that excitement is for another day. So, I've given you an awful lot of information. You do not, like I say, you don't have to know all of this off by heart. I'm not going to test you on all of the historical bits about Dred Scott and the New Deal, but you need to have an awareness of it. You might be able to put into an essay, like I said, for example, where a law doesn't exist, the Constitution can be amended. For example, the 13th Amendment, Congress wanted slavery to be ended, therefore they put a law in. But it would be good if you can learn a couple of things that George Bush put into place, like No Child Left Behind, because that will come in handy when you do the president as well, because we'll be looking at what kind of president they were, you know, how powerful were they, how successful were they. So have an awareness of what they did, and also, you know, how Republican was George Bush. Well, looking at this, he looks quite left-wing. There's been a big expansion in federal powers. And then also be aware of things that Obama's done. Now, I have, if you print this out as 2 sides of A4, on the back there will be room for Trump, and we can have a look at what President Trump has done and whether he has given states more powers or expanded federal government. What we're going to do over the next couple of lessons is that we're going to have a look at the 6 cases that are on pretude, because they really are great examples of showing us when states have done well at taking back power and when federal government has sort of expanded their powers. And in the next lesson, we're going to have a look at marijuana and stand your ground. After that, we'll have a look at euthanasia, so California's end-of-life policy and the sanctuary cities. Third lesson, we'll have a look at gun controls in America, and we'll look at Trump and his idea in sanctuary cities. So if you want to get ahead, you could print out the case studies that are on pretude. So you go to US politics on pretude, and then go to Constitution and Federalism, and if you scroll down, there is a section that has all of those cases on there, and you could print them out or just save them onto your computer so we can read through them. I am going to check that you all understood this, but like I said, it doesn't matter if there are some real nitty-gritty bits that you don't get, as long as you've got the idea. The main idea is that federalism is an ever-changing concept, and there are times when federal government has more control and times when the states have sort of fought against that and tried to take back power. But ultimately, I think if we were concluding, we would say that federal government's got much bigger. Cheerio.